And while I was at Vanderbilt, I was part of the first generation of women who, in any numbers, were pursuing doctoral degrees. In fact, my financial aid form to Vanderbilt, when I was filling it out, asked me about my wife's sources of income, because there were so few women applicants. It was presumed that the applicants were men. It was presumed they were married, and that their wives had some sort of income to contribute to their degree program. I must say that was the last year that was on the application. I probably, and among other women students, wrote a little nasty note on this application saying I did not have a wife, and that very few women did have wives, and I really wasn't interested in filling this form out. So they moved forward in future years. But the impact of being part of the first generation is that there was very little cognizance when I began graduate school that religion and the experience of religion, the way of thinking about religion, could be gendered. That in a classroom, male students and female students might have different responses. And when we looked at what persons had said about religion and human meaning, women students at Vanderbilt, and I was one of them, began to ask new questions, to look at things in different ways. And again, that was enormously exciting, because when one is in grad school, we are always asked to do original work. Do something that hasn't been done before. Think something that hasn't been thought before. And for the women students there, it was like, well, this is easy. There's a whole 50% of the human race that hasn't been thought of before. There's also the beginnings at that time of an understanding that religion was also very much raced, and that the first generation of African American students, and any number, were also at Vanderbilt. And so there were conversations about the whiteness of religion in terms of the academic study of religion in the United States and the maleness of it. And I became interested in a couple of areas that have stayed with me. I was very concerned about violence against women. I was very concerned about religion's complicity in that violence. So that was one thing I began to study. I was also very interested in the human body, that we use our bodies in being religious, and yet very little had been said about the human body in the study of religion. I think now that seems somewhat incredible to us, because what we call the cutting edge in academic study of religion really focuses on the human body. And I would say that's thanks to the last 25 years of scholarship, led primarily, though not exclusively, by women scholars that have brought into focus the centrality of the human body to much experience. There's a wonderful anthropologist, Mary Douglas, who's an elderly woman now, and she was, as a young woman, she wasn't part of the first generation of women in anthropology. She was one of a handful. She was the only woman in her classes, and she studied the human body, and she's a heroine to women of my generation, because she really broke the ground for this study on her own and in the classroom, where her colleagues simply thought she was studying stuff that didn't matter. And now she's a towering figure. She fortunately lived long enough to see her book that was published, I think, way back in around 1960. It languished for many years, and then in the 1980s and 90s became probably one of the top-selling books in the anthropology of religion and study of the body and religion. And I have enjoyed very much, indebted to her work, and have tried to focus in my own studies on the human body, and again, that's a fascinating area. I think in terms of what is most important to me as a scholar, the status of women in terms of difficulties that women encounter and how, including violence, and my own contribution to that study is looking at theoretical responses. Theory, I think, is needed, because to look at very complex problems, we need multi-layered approaches to them, and one of these layers is called theory or philosophy. And it's a particular way of looking at any problem that contributes to clarity and contributes to what I believe is a sophisticated approach to causality. And that in the absence of drawing the tools that philosophers have perfected over many generations to these problems, we often miss something important. So my own contribution has been to look at questions of the negative aspects of women's lives and bring these very rigorous tools to unpacking the problems. And I hope that I've made a contribution. The other area I've mentioned is the human body and how the religion is an embodied process. And then finally, and most recently, in the 1980s, feminist scholars of religion had some very clear answers to women who chose religious lives that were different than those feminist scholars would choose. In other words, women who were not feminists and who chose traditional religious lives in, say, Orthodox Judaism, Islam, evangelical Christianity. And we had, as feminist scholars, an understanding that those choices were wrong, that they were wrong for women to make them, that the women were either ignorant of their circumstances, and that's why they were practitioners of these particular religions, or they were dupes. And I think any study religion in its growing phases, I think that you'd be hard-pressed to find a scholar who would say they've never had a bad idea, that they never went off on the wrong track. We all do, and I think one of the wrong tracks in the 1980s was understanding that the choices that feminist scholars were making about religion needed to be made by all women. And so my latest area of research is focusing on how women experience agency, meaning have lives that are characterized by freedom and choice, autonomy, all the good things that I think any human being should value, and how one can do that and be not a feminist and an Orthodox Jew, a devout Muslim woman, or an evangelical Christian woman. And this is a new area of, I'm not the only one doing this, there are quite a few feminist scholars who are engaging in conversations that we didn't have a decade ago to find out what women are thinking who are making choices in their lives differently than we would, and looking for indications, which I think are definitely there, that those choices also are characterized by successful searches for freedom, agency, and autonomy.